Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the 1,775 poems of the Johnson edition of the poems of Emily Dickinson. We turn now to poem number 11, very early on in our volume, I Never Told the Buried Gold. Now our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, chats with Emily, our playlist. And I'm hopeful that you've been exposed to our introductory set of comments in that intro lecture. And of course, at poem 10, we just finished with My Wheel is in the Dark. Now, speaking of the dark, this is a poem that has confused a number of readers. It is one of early on Emily's really demanding poems. And yet, I'm going to make the argument that I think the word picture that she's playing around with is actually not that difficult. The idea of an ended day, the idea of sunset, the idea of somehow trying to reclaim something that has been lost. Notice here, buried gold. Later it will be, an ingot. We'll try and figure this out together. Let's enjoy the reading of the poem. I never told the buried gold upon the hill that lies. I saw the sun, his plunder done, crouch low to guard his prize. He stood as near as stood you here. A pace had been between, but did but a snake bisect the break, my life had forfeit been. That was a wondrous booty, I hoped 'twas honest gained. Those were the fairest ingots that ever kissed the spade. Whether to keep the secret, whether to reveal, whether as I ponder, kid will sudden sail. Could a shrewd advise me, we might Eden divide. Should a shrewd betray me, Atropos decide. Notice that the one exclamation point of this poem is at the very end with that last line. And the idea of fate is going to be central to our reading of this poem. Now, let's begin by first of all saying I never told the buried gold upon the hill. Now, the use of the word told here is fascinating, how she will play around with a word like told. She's speaking about declarations, and is she speaking rather about discovery. Notice, I saw the sun, his plunder done. In other words, the setting sun here is like a pirate maybe, crouching over stolen bits of gold, right? Crouch low to guard his prize. In other words, she's imagining someone who has discovered something, but is worried that soon it will be lost, right? Or given away, or discovered in some way. Notice the pirate here stood as near as stood you here. Again, this takes us back to something we said in our last conversation in poem 10, where I said the last line, at you and I, of course you and me, should have been the appropriate grammatical phrasing. But this intimacy of Emily, it's almost as if she is sharing with you. This is why we are calling our series Chats with Emily. It's as if she's sitting right there with you. He stood as near as stood you here. A pace had been between, did but a snake bisect the break. And we're familiar with her narrow fellow in the grass and the way she plays with snakes. In other words, she's so captivated, so enthralled, so enraptured by the closeness of what is being observed that a snake could attack and my life had forfeit been. In other words, fully engaged in whatever it is that is being discussed here as the gold. Then there seems to be now a stepping. It's almost like this was the memory, now we'll comment on it. That was a wondrous booty. She loves the word wondrous. Booty will take us to line 9, or to poem 900. Would I restore my booty to that bold person God? You can run that one down. We'll obviously see it later when we hit poem 900. That was a wondrous booty, right? And here we may be talking about inspiration, obviously. I hoped 'twas honest gained. Those were the fairest ingots. We're back now to the idea of gold, right? That ever kissed the spade. And I cannot help but think about her use of the word kissed here. And I cannot help but think about our study of Milton's Paradise Lost. Emily would have understood, I think, her referencing here. You'll remember in Paradise Lost, we've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. You'll remember that they are rifling, the devils are rifling through the ground to get to the gold, you'll remember. And this word picture here is, I don't think a pejorative one, I think it's a positive one. Whether, now this is the question, and so much of Emily's poetry is like this. It's very Hegelian. We've used this term before. Very Hegelian, between this and that. It's like Hamlet's to be or not to be. What should I do? There's always, it seems, a choice in Emily's poetry. Notice the choice here. Now, whether to keep the secret, a very popular word with Emily, whether to reveal, so there it is. She is playing with to be or not to be. Whether as I ponder, Kid will suddenly sail, the pirate, of course, Kid here. The pirate's son, we might say. Kid will sudden sail. In other words, how much time, tick-tock, 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 how much time do I have remaining before the setting sun actually goes away? Then, sounding very much like our reading of Virgil's Aeneid, for example, or the quest for Tiresias in the underworld in Homer's Odyssey. This idea of the shrewd, the idea of the teller of all truths, right? Could a shrewd advise me? This notion of always looking for advice when, it's Emily as pedagogue, Emily as teacher. We might even divide. In other words, if I could get somebody to give me good information, I might be willing to divide my booty, my gold here. Should a shrewd betray me, Atropos decide. Atropos, one of the three fates in Greek mythology. In other words, by the way, this is the only use of this word in all of Emily's poetry. In other words, if the advice is no help, I'm going to basically leave it to fate. She is, with a wise advisor, willing to divide whatever the booty is. She's always looking for some level of advice. Now, I see a lot of humor in this, as I see in many of Emily's offerings. I think here you could understand this poem as a quest for inspiration and the old notion of divulging the secret of inspiration. I think at 2A, the goal of the artist is to see the light, that is to say inspiration, and to seek advice that one can actually use. I would be willing, she says, to give away so much if I could just get the right kind of advice. At 2B, I love her word choice, for example, of Atropos, one of the fates in Greek mythology. She just kind of assumes that her reader will know who that is. At 3A, I cannot help but gesture us towards Plato's Republic, Book 7, the cave allegory, the idea of seeing the light of the sun as one emerges from the cave. And finally at 3B, what was a time when you needed good advice and you got it? What was a time when you needed good advice and you didn't get it? And how did that make you feel? I'm hopeful that your own study of Emily's poetry is starting to awaken you to great gold. Thank you.